all you heroes, hawks, heralds, crows, pirates, and wardens. Welcome to the Dragon Age Lorecast, where we unpack, discuss, and galaxy brain about all the lore behind the Dragon Age series.
We are so excited to bring you this podcast. Every episode, we'll be talking about a different topic in the Dragon Age universe. From character deep dives to exalted marches and elven gods, we will cover it all.
There will be spoilers. And always remember, swooping is bad.
Hello and welcome to the Dragon Age Lorecast, where we talk about Dragon Age and its lore. I am one of your hosts, Austin, also known as Teacup, and I am here with my other host.
That's me. I'm Shelby, or She-Cup.
And we are here to talk about Dragon Age and its lore. So much. We are continuing our book series. Our books of Dragon Age. We've been going through each and every one in the comics, and we have been on the comics for a while, and we are back with a book for this one.
Yeah, I don't think we've read a book since The Calling. Is that accurate?
To Venture Nights.
Oh yeah, that's right. Okay, but yeah, that took almost a month. So right. I feel like I don't even know. Yeah, so we were talking about Last Flght today, which I know we originally intended to start this season with going in chronological order as these things happen in the game series, but we kind of moved things around as we, found out so much information about the Veilguard. So we kind of have started going in order of things that may have bearing on the Veilguard, but now we're kind of back to the Dragon Age chronological order. But I think this book specifically definitely does have implications for the Veilguard, which we will get into at the very end. If you have listened or read this book before, you definitely know, if you've read it before, you may know the spoiler at the end, but we're going to save that for the end in case you're tuning in for the first time and you have no idea anything about this book. So let's just jump right in. So just a little bit of bio about the book first. So it's written by Liane Merciel. It was published by Tor Books on September 16th, 2014. My show notes say 2024, which is not correct. Anyway, the book consists of two timelines. One in the Dragon Age, following mages fleeing the Hosberg Circle in light of the Mage Templar War, and another in the Exalted Age, following the Grey Wardens in the Fourth Blight. The Exalted Age is the 500s, so it's a pretty big time that we're going back in history to. Another notable thing about this novel is that the first timeline in the Dragon Age takes place over a very short amount of time, about a year from 941 to 942 Dragon, while the second timeline in the Exalted Age takes place over about 12 years. So that's a pretty big jump. And also notable is that this book is the first one that was written by a non-Dragon Age writer, so someone that does not work at BioWare. And while she was actually given the option of using pre-established characters from the franchise, she actively opted not to do so because she did not want to risk the chance of writing an established character in a way that was contrary to what had been previously written. So I think the last thing I have to say before we dive into the plot is that if you're wondering how Asan gets to be in the Veilguard, this episode is for you. So, Austin, do you have any thoughts before we talk about the plot?
I don't think so, other than this book, while yes, you can tell it feels in Dragon Age, you can tell that it is not written by someone who is deep established in Dragon Age, or even is this big just writing for video game dialogue, because the book itself feels more like a novel, I think, than The Calling or Stolen Throne has felt.
I totally agree with this. And I think that all of the writers at Dragon Age, at BioWare, are phenomenal writers. Don't get me wrong. But often when you write in a certain style, you fall into the routine of that style. I do this for work all the time. I have to write really short sentences for work. I have to write in very plain language. And so when I'm writing fiction, it's often much harder for me to write long flowing dialogue, flowy sentences, flowery language. That's more difficult for me because I am so used to writing things that are like very short. So I think that that's natural for writers. But I also feel like video game writers specifically have to focus so much on dialogue that sometimes the plot suffers. And I do not at all feel that with this novel.
No, there's a lot more exposition in this book than I think in the previous around there.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. So let's get into the plot then. And I do want to do this a little bit differently because there are two timelines. I want to look at them separately, and then we can kind of compare them, talk about anything between the two. But I want to jump back to the Exalted Age timeline first, and then look at the Dragon Age timeline. Because at the end of the day, the Dragon Age timeline is much shorter. There's really only 4 or 5 major beats in the plot anyway. So we're just going to head to the Exalted Age first.
I think to help people understand this as the resident Assassin's Creed expert, this is very much like you have the historical narrative and then the modern day narrative. And the modern day narrative, while important and gives context to the historical narrative, is not as detailed, is not as built through because we're here for the historical narrative.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so the way that I'm going to break this down is basically I'm going to sum up everything that happens in a certain year, and we can discuss all of that, and then we'll move on to the next set of years, because in the book, each chapter is a different year in the Exalted Age, and they do skip over several years. So it goes from like 512 to 519 to 520 to 524. So it kind of just skips all over the place. So let's start in 512 Exalted. And so in this year, Garahel and Isaiah are elven siblings, and they are Grey Wardens who have been assigned to be griffin riders as the Blight has just erupted near Antiva. They attempt to evacuate the royals of Antiva, but the royals wanted to deliberate and pack and do all the things that waste time, essentially. So in this time where they're waiting for the royals to kind of determine what the plan is and what the next steps are, Garahel and Isaiah both bond with their griffins. And Garahel bonds with Crooky Tail, and Isaiah bonds with Revis. So in this time, also Darkspawn encroach upon Antiva City. Other cities in Antiva have really already been overrun, so this is kind of a desperate situation. And the people of Antiva City realize, specifically the guards and like servants in the palace, realize that the royals are about to abandon them to the Blight. And understandably, they're pissed off. And so they attack the palace, and the wardens are barely able to leave with some of the royals. Like King Eladio is killed in this fighting. And they also leave along with Kalian, an Antivan blood mage, and Amadis Vale, a princess of Starkhaven. They are attacked, however, along the way by the archdemon, and pretty much all of the Antivan royal family is wiped out. They're fleeing from the archdemon, of course, and they head to Wycombe, where the people are basically stranded. And there's a short bit of time. Isaiah has some stressed out moments where she's upset that they can't do anything to help the people of Wycombe, and she has this idea that, hey, maybe we can build the Grey Warden version of an elven Aravel pulled by griffins instead of Hala to transport the refugees of Wycombe to Starkhaven. And so that's kind of the first arc at the very beginning of the Fourth Blight.
Yeah, just right away the impressions of this that I keep going for is like sorry, getting my words. Everything that I know about other blights, the second blight, the fourth blight, the third blight, all that we hear about this is like the fifth blight is like just a walk in the park compared to the rest of them. Like, and I think it's because it was too early and it was not a natural blight, the fifth blight.
What do you mean it wasn't a natural blight?
Well, the architect awakes.
Oh, yeah.
What's his name?
Earthemiel.
Yeah.
I do agree with you that because they caught it so early, it wasn't as devastating as it could be. But at the end of the day, you have to remember the blight really did destroy Ferelden. So Ferelden is significantly impacted. It just didn't have the opportunity to spread throughout Thedas like other blights have. And this is something we'll probably address here. But the really only countries that get affected by the fourth blight are the Anderfels, the Free Marches, and Antiva, which is interesting to me that Navarra isn't like not mentioned at all. And it's kind of in there in between. And so the blight, even though it lasts for 12 years, this one, it doesn't extend down into Orlais and into Ferelden, or into Deventer, at least as far as we know.
And the second blight is almost exclusively in Orlais and maybe Deventer.
I'm going to be really honest with you. I do not remember.
I think that's correct because it's Emperor Draken, who like conscripts the mages to fight in the second blight. And so he is really in there. But I think what really comes down to this is by the third and fourth blight. Because the third blight is kind of like the fifth blight in that it's not as long and they're really prepared for it.
Is that true?
I think so. Because the second one is pretty devastating. Or maybe it's the second one that they're prepared for.
Well, I know that the first blight is the most devastating because it lasts for like 200 years or something.
Mm-hmm.
So the third blight actually occurs in the Third Age, which is interesting connection. And it lasts for 15 years. And it affects pretty much everywhere. Free Marches, Navarra, Orlais, Deventer, and it finally happens that they kill the archdemon at Hunterfell. So that's all over the place. Let me look up the second blight just to compare, since we know that the first one is super devastating. The second blight the second blight occurs from 105 to 195 divine. So this lasts almost the entire age. And this is Zazakel. It affects Anderfels, the Free Marches, Orlais, Deventer, Alamari, Avar, Chasen tribes, etc. Basically everyone. So I do think you're right that the first there's a significant difference between the first and second blights and the third and fourth blights. And as the years progress, they last shorter and shorter amounts of time. I'm not necessarily sure we can just say that's because the Grey Wardens are getting better at dealing with them. I think they got really lucky with the fourth blight, or with the fifth blight, I mean, because at the end of the day, you also have Flemeth's prophecy to Merrick, advising him a blight is coming, this is going to happen. And I think that really changes the trajectory of the fifth blight, because imagine if she hadn't warned him. Do we really think that Merrick, with no warning from Flemeth, would have anticipated a blight coming and would have brought the Grey Wardens back into Ferelden? I think it's pretty doubtful, especially since Loghain is so opposed to that. Mm-hmm. So if that had not happened and the fifth blight had erupted in the Korcari wilds as it did, invading into Ferelden without a Grey Warden presence, I mean, Ferelden would be wasteland in the current timeline.
And I think that's part of like Merrick probably has a sense of urgency after his encounter with the architect and everything like there. Just understanding like this is getting really, really big, and we need to deal with this because we don't know when this is going to come, because this guy is going to cause a blight. But I also think that it comes down to, like, the first blight lasts so long because they don't have Grey Wardens for a lot of it, and they can't kill the Archdemon.
Yes, absolutely.
And probably the second blight is there's not a lot of Grey Wardens.
Probably. I haven't done my research into the second blight, so I'm not necessarily confident to say. And there is a reason why we haven't covered the blights yet. Part of that is because I anticipate we'll have some updated lore in Veilguard's release in just a couple of weeks, which is amazing to say. So stay tuned for where we'll go after that.
The last thing that I want to say before we can move on from this doesn't have to do with the blights, but I just love the trope of, as the book starts and you have the timeline with Vea and that's not her name. No, I'm in the Valya. Yeah. In the Dragon Age. And she's like coming through and they see Garahel and they're like, oh, here's this, hero who stopped the fourth blight, and he's amazing and he does all this stuff, and then you get in it and he is just kind of like a frat folk boy.
Yeah, 100%. He is a player, which we'll talk about continuing on. But I mean, I also hesitate to say that because he does have a pretty significant long-term relationship in this book.
Yes, that is true. I think it's more of like his energy. Not that he's actually like that, but he gives off that energy.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, well, let's go to 519 Exalted. So, basically, Darkspawn lay siege to the city of Hosberg in the Anderfels, which should be sounding pretty familiar to you because that will be a location in the Veilguard. But anyway, Isaiah and Kalian find a Darkspawn tunnel into the Deep Roads, which they hypothesize is the access point into the Deep Roads that the Darkspawn have been using to attack the Anderfels so heavily. So they find this. They're pretty determined to collapse the tunnel. They also use blood magic to find the tunnel. That's pretty significant. Kalian uses blood magic throughout the novel and teaches it to Isaiah. And so that's a big theme here. But anyway, they do try to collapse the tunnel and they do succeed, but it's also not as simple as that. They lose a couple of their fellow Grey Wardens who die in this battle because the Darkspawn are pretty much there waiting for them to do this. And so there's a bit of a skirmish that ensues. And the siege does continue in Hosberg. And a griffin named Shrike contracts the taint. The only thing Isaiah can do to help him, at least as far as she can think of, is to put him through the joining via blood magic, because you can't just put a griffin through the joining because they have such a reaction to the Darkspawn blood and the Archdemon blood in the joining that it basically makes them want to kill themselves. And so basically what Isaiah does is she puts them through the joining and she takes control of their mind via blood magic to calm them and soothe them and convince them to accept the joining. And so she does that to Shrike, and it does save him, but it basically turns him into the most aggressive griffin of all time. And Isaiah, Garahel, Kalian, and Shrike's owner all realize pretty much immediately other people are going to want this, especially if the blight worsens. This was a huge mistake. And Isaiah, for her part, almost immediately regrets it.
Yeah, it's just a thing of, again, it's more building into, and the calling does this really well, of like the ideology of any means necessary to stop the blight is a maxim that can, if taken too far, could be just as devastating to society as the blight is. And the earth, like talking about the Thetis earth as a whole, the planet.
Absolutely. And I mean, I do think, to be fair, I think that the Grey Wardens of the Calling are in an extremely different place that the Grey Wardens of Last Flight are in. I don't necessarily blame Isaiah for what she does, because she does it in an act of desperation. And I feel like if you and I were in a war with the Archdemon and Darkspawn, and this was the decision that we were facing, like, I don't think I could make this decision, you know? And so I hesitate to pass judgment on her. Like, I definitely think what she does is wrong, but at the same time, this is a once in a lifetime situation that they're in. Whereas in The Calling, Genevieve just makes bad, selfish decisions the whole time. So I do feel like they're in totally different situations. Yes, Genevieve has to deal with a talking Darkspawn, but at the end of the day, she's not living under a blight, and that makes a big difference to me.
Oh, I totally agree with that. I was just saying, like, general themes of even that Isaiah, Garahel, and Kalian all realize, like, oh, the powers that be are going to take this and do this. And I think that Isaiah and Garahel, and especially Kalian, given their backgrounds, are most astute to realize this. I mean, Isaiah and Garahel are elves, so they know exactly how far the powers that be at Thedas will go. And I think Kalian, as an Antivan Crow, knows the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So a year later, in 520 Exalted, they are able to free Hosberg from the siege after they collapse this tunnel. The Queen of the Anderfels, Queen Merywyn, who actually is really the Queen Regent for her son, she decides to host a celebratory feast, which is quite a bit premature since the Archdemon is still around. But to be fair, they have dealt a huge blow to the Archdemon. But she is kind of, I want to say bonkers, but that might not be fair. I think she's living in a fairy tale is probably the way I would frame it, because she is not living in reality. She has lived in her little palace in Hosberg, and while she's absolutely had to make sacrifices, and absolutely her life has been changed by the Archdemon and the Blight, it has not been the same for her as it has for the everyday people of the Anderfels. Like, she still has food. She still has servants. She's still protected. Like, she's still living a life of severe privilege. So she is Delulu. She's living on Delulu Island because she's like, oh, the Hosberg siege is finally over. Yay, we can have this feast. We're going to cook all this food. We're going to party. We're going to dance the night away. Yay. And the Grey Wardens are like, you know, we still have to kill the Archdemon. Antiva is dead and the Free Marches are dying. Like, you realize that, right? And she's like, yeah, but we're in the Anderfels and we can party. And they're like, okay, whatever. Anything to make you happy, I guess. But they eventually come to this kind of agreement where what Queen Merywyn wants more than anything is to bone Garahel. And what the Grey Wardens want more than anything is her army. So Garahel essentially offers himself up as the prized pony. He basically prostitutes himself for this woman and secures her army to go fight for the Grey Wardens in the Free Marches afterwards as a result. So, in this time period, we also learned that Garahel and Amadis Vale, who's a princess of Starkhaven, as we've said, related to Sebastian, as you could probably guess, she and Garahel have developed a relationship. They don't really quantify it. They're not calling each other partner, girlfriend, or boyfriend. They don't get married, nothing like that. But they are in a very committed relationship throughout most of this book. And they are together when Garahel sleeps with Queen Merywyn. And so she very much understands that Garahel needs to do this in order to secure the army for the Wardens. And so her deal is basically like, okay, fine, you can go sleep with her and make this deal, but I want a griffin out of it. And so Amadis becomes the only person who's a non-warden to get a griffin. And she names her griffin Smoke, and Smoke and Crooky Tail Garahel's griffin, they also become in a little relationship thing. So anyway, all of that happens after the feast. They go to help the free marches, and Isaiah actually gets sent to command Fortress Hain. Fortress Hain is deep in the Veilguard Mountains, and we know it as Chateau Hain. It has been abandoned for decades, and so they start work immediately on making it suitable for the wardens and any refugees to live in. Isaiah uses blood magic to basically bring ice down from the mountain into the fortress, making a lake and a body of water to use as their drinking water, cooking water, all of those things for the residents. At the same time, however, the first warden orders Isaiah to put the griffins of the fortress through the joining. She doesn't put her griffin, Revis, through it. It is really heartbreaking. It's a heartbreaking scene. Isaiah is really impacted by this. She fights Garahel on the order. She doesn't want to do it, but he eventually is like, you have to do this. Like, there's no other option. Like, we need them. We can't send you more backups. You're gonna have to do this yourself. And so she does it. And it allows them to launch a rescue at Kirkwall and Starkhaven and bring those people to Fortress Hain.
Yeah. I wonder if this author has read the Inheritance series.
Why?
Just because the bond between Griffin and Griffin Rider is so similar to the bond between Dragon and Dragon Rider.
It is similar, but I mean, the Griffins don't speak.
I guess that's true, but like, it's more of an emotional bond, and I just imagine, like, it really is heartbreaking to watch not only like the Griffins riders in this scene like feel the Griffins going insane and doing all that aggressive, but Isaiah has this like mental connection to all of them. She feels each and every single one of them go insane.
She does, but I think also part of that is because she went into their minds with blood magic.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Like, this is so traumatic for her, which I think really explains her behavior at the end of the book, or the end of the story in this part.
Yes, I absolutely agree with that, and we'll get there. Is there anything else you want to talk about before we go to our mid-break?
It is kind of nice in this book to explore these places that we've heard mention of, but we haven't really like embraced a lot. Like, we obviously know Wycombe from, especially if you play Lavelle and Inquisitor, like they're a big part of your backstory and everything like that. But it's nice to like see these other places even in a novel of kind of how they go about, and that just getting there, because they are kind of mysterious outside of Kirkwall. Like, we don't really know what they're like, and we don't even really know what like Starkhaven is like.
That's true. We've only ever seen Starkhaven in the comics, I think. And I did appreciate reading about Hosburg, because when they released the locations, I think we said this on an episode, I was like, I didn't know the Anderfells had wetlands. I thought that the Anderfells was just completely desert wasteland kind of thing, like the Forbidden Oasis and
Hissing Waste.
The Hissing Waste and the Western Approach. But in reading this, I was like, oh, there's like a river here. There's all this stuff. Like the southern, is it southern? No, it's the eastern. I'm really not good at directions. The eastern part of the Anderfells is much more like an actual place. Like they have forests and rivers and like a city and everything. So yeah, I was reminded of that the Hosburg wetlands did not come out of nowhere. So that was nice too. But if we don't have anything else to talk about with 520 Dragon or 520 Exalted, we can go to our mid-break.
All right.
What is this? A new book? All this shit is weird. Oh, Verk, that is a terrible title. What are you even thinking?
That book you were reading this morning? Hessarian's Spear. I don't think he had a spear in the legends.
He does in this one. Read the description.
Andraste knelt before no man but her maker. But she hadn't counted on the Archon Hessarian. Can Hessarian penetrate the tight-knit defenses of the warrior prophetess? Will she be prepared to face the full blast of his power? Wait a minute. Isabella, this is a vulgar thing.
You want to borrow it?
No!
You sure? It has pictures.
Not listening, I'm not listening.
Varric, does Hawk ever autograph books?
Why? Doesn't your copy of The Tale of the Champion have a big hole in it?
Yes, but it could also have Hawk's signature on it.
All right, welcome to the mid-break, where we take time to thank our patrons. Thank you to all of our patrons who support the show. We had a great patron chat last week. And then thank you to our first patrons, Genesis and Lisa M. You can join us on Patreon at patreon.com/DALorecast. You can go there, find that link in the episode description, and support us. And we greatly appreciate any support that you can get. If you sign up at our Antivan Crow for $10 a month, you will get our sticker merch for that. And that's a big thing. We only have one sticker left to send out for the quarter, or for the year. But we will send out merch again next year. So if you want to sign up at that tier, it's a great thing to do. Another great way to support us is to leave us ratings and reviews on Apple or Spotify. If you leave us 5 stars and some kind words, we will read it out on a future episode of the show. And I have a review that comes from Apple, I believe. And this is from Willie Bauerfeld. That's how I'm going to say that. If I've mispronounced that, I apologize. And says, peak Dragon Age lore content. I love this podcast so much. I'm a photographer in the middle of wedding season, so I'm spending most of my days editing away on my computer. I've been listening to every bit of DA content out there to get my head back into it for DAV. And since I found the Lorecast, I haven't looked anywhere else again, except for the occasional Split the Veil episodes. Keep it coming. I love the DA universe, and the way you present it is just so chill, yet still fascinating. One inconsistency, a quote that I assume is from me, DA2 is my favorite game of the series. But on a way later patron chat, apparently I said I never said that it was my favorite game. Look, you cannot hold me accountable for things I say on the podcast, except you can. I will take this back. I don't know why I said this, because DA2 is my favorite game of the series, like story-wise and companions and all of that. So I'll stay. Yes, it is my favorite. Says, I felt a little betrayed as it was my favorite one as well, and I thought I finally wasn't the only one. Well, you should definitely come and join our Discord if you haven't, because there's a lot of DA2 stance on there. You are definitely not alone. We are strong in number. Even though it definitely has its flaw, the game just feels so complete. Even the side missions help to create this immersion into Kirkwall perfectly. I also feel like you guys have come a long way. The more recent episodes feel like a dialogue discussion instead of person reads book, other person nods. And then they said they're not a native speaker of English, and they hope everything I said makes sense. Yeah, we're glad that you enjoyed the podcast. Thank you so much for leaving that review. Again, if you want to talk some DA2 content, join our Discord, and we can do that. Which brings me to my next point. Join the Discord. You can hang out with us there and talk about all kinds of stuff. Also, we launched some new merch for the Veilguard companions. We now have shirts for every companion in the game, right? Every companion in the game for girl dinner, boy dinner, or MB dinner. So if you just are loving yourself some Emmerich, and I guess, did you put Manfred on the shirt too? I didn't actually look at the design.
I put Manfred on Emmerich's shirt, but I did not give Manfred his own shirt because Manfred is not a romanceable companion.
Yes.
But maybe I'll make, you know what? We'll save the monster fucker discussion for later. Come hang out in the Discord. Just ignore me.
Anyway, yes. If you are just want to jump that old man's bone so bad, get yourself an Emmerich boy, girl, NB dinner shirt. And those are available on our website, Cubs Podcasting and more. And I think You want to discuss this, or do you want to not?
We can.
Okay. If you haven't seen, since the recording of this episode, we are recording this, there was an announcement about the content that and decisions that we will be able to import into the Veilguard. And if you do not want any kind of spoilers of anything like that, you just need to skip ahead from the mid-break, because this is the last thing we're going to talk about. But BioWare did announce that there are only a few decisions that we will be able to import into Veilguard. We will be able to customize our Inquisitor's appearance, which is awesome. Hopefully much more robust than Hawk. I think we all feel the frustration of what did they do to my child when we all created our Hawk in Inquisition.
I mean, I have several hot takes. I don't mind Hawk in Inquisition. I think Hawk looks great in Inquisition. I am also usually one who leans more toward a default Hawk, though. And I feel like a default female Hawk specifically. And so I feel like those are imported fairly well. But just to get into Veilguard a little bit, they did announce there are only going to be 3 major decisions that you can choose from when you set up your world state at the beginning of the game. And those are who your Inquisitor romanced.
Well, we know who you're picking.
Okay, anyway, who your Inquisitor romanced.
The past years have been so busy. We have
who your Inquisitor romanced, whether or not the Inquisition is disbanded or made into a peacekeeping force, and whether or not you vowed to kill Solus or redeem him. So those are the 3 choices. However, that has spawned a lot of discourse, and for understandable reasons. I am a little disappointed by that. I do think a big missed opportunity is the Well of Sorrows choice. But a lot of the other stuff, other than that one, I can understand excluding, because it is over 10 years later, number one. And number 2, the geography is pretty different. Like, we're not going to Orlais, we're not going to Ferelden, with the exception of Antiva. And I'll give you a little bit of the Anderfels. We're not going into heavily Andrastian chantry places. Like, yes, technically the Anderfels are the most devout, but I don't necessarily translate religiosity and the level of religiosity into institutional religion. I feel like when we say the Anderfels are the most devout nation in Thedas, to me, that implies that the people are the most religious, not necessarily that the institution of the chantry has the most power there. And so for me, people who just are everyday chantry followers are not going to be that impacted by who is the divine, even from so far away, because they are far away from the seat of the chantry's power. And furthermore, in reality, the Anderfels are ruled by the Grey Wardens. And so all of this ties into my point that all of the places we are going, at least in terms of this one, like, divine decision, all the places we're going, they are so different and so far away from the places that we have been before. Some of them, yes, are close, like Antiva is close to the Free Marches. But all of these places are undergoing so much turmoil and are really influenced by outside places. Like Tevinter obviously is influenced by the Magisterium. Ravain is influenced by the Lords of Fortune and the Cunari, etc. The Anderfels, as we've mentioned, are influenced by the Wardens. And so I just feel like there are so many mitigating factors, and we just truly still don't know what the game is going to be like, that it's for me, the backlash to this decision that is, oh my God, I'm not even excited for this game anymore. I'm going to cancel my pre-order. I'm never playing Dragon Age again. That behavior is insane. That is crazy. And if you truly are that affected by previous games' decisions not being included, to the extent that they were in previous games. I'm not really sure that you're a fan of Dragon Age the Veilguard as much as you are a fan of recreating these old games. And I really feel like we have, as a fandom, have criticized the people who want, the grifters who want Dragon Age the Veilguard to be exactly like Dragon Age Origins. But to me, this behavior is very similar. Not exactly the same, of course, and there's no like oppressive stuff dialed into it, but to me it's similar, a similar reaction of like they're changing something, so we have to hate it. To me, my opinion is, let's give it a chance. Maybe it fails. It's okay to be disappointed. It's okay to not like it, but let's take a step back from the dramatics.
I do want to just say one thing, because I saw some posts about this of like, we're not going to be able to affect the world of like the drastic changes that a Liliana Divine Victoria could make to the Chantry. And I just want to say, as someone who is established and like well into a religious institution, change is slow in these things. And we, in our denomination at least, we have had women's ordination for well over half a century. And there are still places where people do not want women's ordination. So I don't expect someone somewhere as far away as the Anderfells, even if Liliana is divine, to have elven clergy.
Sure. But also, Tevinter, where I think the majority of the game is going to take place, has an entirely different chantry system.
Exactly.
And that's the thing about it for me. I think people are vastly underestimating how different Tevinter is from the rest of Thedas. And so I think we can be disappointed about this. I'm disappointed about this decision, but we also don't know if we'll be able to make choices in dialogue about previous world states. I think that's a possibility we might be able to make, but we just don't know. We haven't played the game yet. So let's just hold off on the judgment and let's stop like doom scrolling and freaking out on the internet. And let's just wait the 3 weeks to a month until the game comes out and give it a chance.
Right. And I just also want to say, like, the Inquisitor is a cameo.
Yes.
The Inquisitor, this is not the Inquisitor's game. No. This is Rook's game.
Exactly. And Rook is a nobody. Rook is not a powerful person like the Inquisitor, and it is intended to be that way. So let's just hold off on the hysterics for a minute. Maybe you'll get mad at me for saying that, but really sit down and think about, is what I am posting on the internet appropriate? Am I bullying people? Am I being unfair to the developers when I really don't know how this is going to play out yet? Absolutely be upset, but let's hold off on the attacking.
Yeah, definitely. And I think just hold off and let's see what this game is. You know, there have been lots of points where I've been skeptical about some of this game when the art design came out, and then I've seen the game and I'm like, oh, okay. Like, I can still say like, oh, this does feel a little more modern age and less like classic Dragon Age, but it doesn't look cartoony to me.
Yes, I agree.
And so, like, there are times, let the game reveal, do what it needs to do. And I also want to point out to everyone, in case you haven't noticed, any spoilers that we've gotten are all Act 1 spoilers.
Yes.
Think about the dramatic shift the game takes from Act 1 to 2 of 1 to 2 to 3 of Dragon Age 2. And how different the game feels. That's a big difference.
It is. It's a big shift. But that's all we've got to say on the Veilguard for right now, but let's get back into Last Flght.
All right.
The past years have been so busy. We have earned at least a few moments of rest. A calm night out sounds... Oh, bravo! Bravo! Was the woman in gold playing a king? Who was the man in feathers? Oh, it's all very simple. The first actor's mask is determined by... well, I will lend you the program guide. But tell me, did you enjoy the performance? That was one of the greatest things I've ever seen. Truly. That part with the glittery, and they actually set fire to... Yes, I truly enjoyed it. Then I call tonight a great success.
I've got some of it written down now.
Give it here. Her breasts strained against the leather jerkin like two wild stallions corralled against their will. She pounced, the smooth moves of a jungle cat, and locked her thighs around Donnick's waist.
What?
Nothing.
What is that?
Shh.
Isabella just thought she'd celebrate your love affair with a written dedication.
It's friend fiction. I do it out of love.
I will never, ever be clean again.
You fear barbarians will swoop down upon you.
Yes, swooping is bad.
All right, so let's get back into it, and we're going to skip forward about 4 years to 524. And this year of the Exalted Age is when the Blight ends. So I'm going to split our discussion into 2 bullet points before the end of the Blight and after the end of the Blight as we wrap up this part of the book. So during the Blight, the taint is speeding up in all of the wardens who've been there throughout the whole thing, and she's losing her hair. Specifically, Isaiah she's turning into a ghoul, and she knows it. But battles are continuing, and so they're going to fight as long as they can, right? And so they plan a strike into Antiva City to take on the Archdemon. Over the city of Aisley, they drop clay bombs on the Darkspawn Horde in order to kind of provoke the Archdemon into coming out and attacking them. And ultimately, it works. The Archdemon fights the group of Wardens and Griffons, and Garahel is the one who fells it. Rivas, Isaiah, Kalian, and Amadis survive, but many others perish in the battle. Do you have thoughts about the end of the Blight?
Yeah, just one thing. What is his name? The Orlesian warden that we rescue from Loghain's cell. What's his name?
In Dragon Age Origins?
In Origins.
Shoot, what is his name? It's something with an R.
I remember it. It's like in the cobwebs of my mind. Once you say it, I'm going to be like, oh yeah, that's it. I remember that.
Hold on, I'm looking at my list of known wardens. Riordan?
I think that is. So Riordan, he tells us that killing the Archdemon is normally reserved for an elder warden to go who is like near their calling, because they all know it's going to kill them. And then like here we have 2 Blight examples where that doesn't happen. Someone who is, well, I guess Garahel is kind of older, but like I would consider him still a young warden. He and Isaiah have recently joined the wardens at the start. Now, granted, that's been 12 years ago now.
Yeah, but I mean, I think if you think about it, the calling happens somewhere after 2 to 3 decades of being tainted. So 20-ish years, and we know that it speeds up when there's a Blight on. So if they've been tainted for 12 years, I mean, they're senior wardens. They're high in leadership. They're both field commanders. They both have high ranks. So I do feel like Garahel is a senior warden. He maybe not, like if this was not a Blight, I don't think he and Isaiah would be experiencing their calling right now. But I do think they're well on the side of closer to the calling than further away from it.
Okay, I guess that's fair. I was just thinking that like they're still relatively young, but I forgot about like that Grey Wardens actually don't have that long of a lifespan. Yeah,
and I mean, I think they are young relatively for a human in our perspective, but not necessarily for wardens. And I mean, I do think another thing I think about is we have codex entries about Garahel where they find his helmet over this field or whatever, and like there's something else I don't remember exactly about him, and so the book is very intentional about making sure that like he loses his helmet in the fight with the archdemon and stuff like that. But Garahel also, like, they know in this book that's, as you've said about Riordan, that's how it usually goes, because Garahel is the one, he like screams to the non-wardens who are helping them, like Kalian and Amadis. He's like, it has to be me. Like, it has to be one of us. A Grey Warden has to kill it. And so they know that. And they are very clear about that.
Right. I just want to pause, and I know we're going to talk about the Darkspawn in a future episode. It just is so interesting to me how the archdemon works. Its essence transfers into the closest blighted creature that it can get to, and that's how it survives.
Yeah.
But when it takes into a joined or a tainted warden, who's gone through the joining, it's like the soul goes into that, and that warden dies, and the soul dies with it. That's how it works, right?
The person's soul or the archdemon's soul? The
archdemon, the old god's soul, goes into the warden and kills it. That's how killing the archdemon works. It can't take over the warden because of the joining.
I guess, yeah. I don't know if we know why.
I'm just curious, and then like Corypheus can do it, can transfer through wardens. And so it's just interesting to me. I was just bringing up the point.
It just seemed really off topic when we're already at an hour.
Okay, sorry.
So let's go into what happens after the Blight. Basically, Garahel is given a hero's funeral and is the first elf to have one ever in Thedas history. Isaiah is almost totally a ghoul, and she has no hair, is completely covering herself with robes and extra clothing to basically hide all of these effects. Her voice is changed, and the griffins are behaving erratically. Many are dying, the taint is spreading, and they're even attacking each other, killing each other. The ones who weren't at Fortress Hain are displaying this behavior as well. The first warden orders the Grey Wardens to euthanize any griffin who shows symptoms or aggression. Isaiah looks for a cure by going to Kalian first. However, he is no longer practicing blood magic. He is rebuilding Antiva and encourages her to, find your path to heal the Grey Wardens, like, I believe in you kind of thing. She's frustrated, though, and so she goes and visits Amadis afterwards. Her griffin, Smoke, is struggling and displaying aggression too. But she's also pregnant with a clutch of eggs. Amadis gives Smoke's eggs to Isaiah to purify and preserve before they put down Smoke as well. After she leaves, she takes Smoke's eggs with her and hides them away mysteriously, which we'll get into in a minute, and her and Revis go on their calling together. And that's kind of the end of the Exalted Age Fourth Blight narrative.
Yeah, I really like the story of kind of rediscovering this like ancient thing that has now gone extinct, that we now know is not extinct, because we've heard mentioned of the griffins in Codex Entries, and then we go and see them in this and Codex Entries, and then we see them all over this book and everything like that, and it's very sad. I'm like, oh, this is sad. And you're reading this and you're going like, oh, they're extinct. Like, this is how they go extinct. This is very, very sad. And then you find out that, oh, there's this clutch of eggs that they hide. And I really like that because so much of the Dragon Age is that which was thought to be gone is coming back. Like the age starts with the return of dragons, who they thought were gone. And then now we have the griffins returning. And I really like that narrative of like the Dragon Age being this age of rebirth. Mm-hmm. And that's a theme that we see throughout. The Chantry is going through massive changes. All of the countries are going through massive changes. The Dragon Age is an age of new beginnings, in my opinion.
And upheaval.
Mm-hmm.
But I do agree with you. So let's get into the Dragon Age timeline since you brought it up. So Valia is kind of the main character, the POV narrative of this section. And Her, along with her fellow group of mages, there's a bunch of different names, but the only one that's really important is Seika. They flee from Hosberg to Weishaupt, or I think as we should be pronouncing it is Weishaupt. But anyway, so they flee for safety to get away from the Mage Templar War. When they get there, the wardens put them to work looking for any account of wardens abandoning their posts and or behaving unusually, as well as any reports of talking darkspawn. Valya finds a lyrium-laced war map and a journal which chronicles the 12 years of the Fourth Blight from the perspective of Isaiah. She reads this journal, and throughout this, she struggles with her role at Weishaupt and wonders why the wardens haven't put them through the joining yet. Defected Templars also come seeking shelter there, and that's where Valya meets Rimus, who eventually becomes her friend. But Valya really struggles with the role of the Templars being allowed to be at Weishaupt as well as the mages. But she also, throughout all of this, learns the history of the wardens, learns the history of the Fourth Blight, and of course, Isaiah's secret hiding place for the griffin eggs. Valya then takes Caranel, another warden, Ramus, and Seika with her to find the eggs, which are located in a very dangerous location named Red Bride's Grave, which is a place filled with shrieks, demons, and corpses. So they have to fight when they get there, and Seika dies, but they do discover the griffin eggs, and they have been preserved in magical stasis over the years. When Valya removes the magic, the griffins start to hatch. And that's the end of the book.
Yeah. Just overall about this, I think this is a really great look into a place that is not Orlais or Ferelden affected by the Mage Templar War. Mm-hmm. And I love the fact that I love the scene. It's one of like the second chapters we get in the Dragon Age where Valya realizes, oh, the Templars have come. When the defected Templar shows up, her first reaction is, oh, they're here. The wardens are going to turn me over. Like, the Templars have come looking for me. And then she realizes that they're defected Templars who are running from this war too. And I think it's a great example of a point that Vivian brings up in Inquisition of this war hurts the everyday people. Mm-hmm. The everyday mages and the everyday Templars are hurt by this struggle for power. Yeah. And we need to take in consideration their struggle when we're making grand decisions about this, which is why Vivian votes against separation. That is why. And the fact that it looks like they're condoning the assassination attempt on the Divine. And I think if you don't talk to Vivian, you don't get that. But this book and this scene shows that. And I really love that Valya makes friends with a Templar. And I love that kind of bridging between that. Because so often, especially in the fandom, we have this discourse of Templars are bad, mages are good. Mages can do no wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a few lore things that I really want to talk about really quickly. The first thing is something I know you're really excited about, and which we speculated on in the past about different races and different classes being part of the Antivan Crows and the Grey Wardens too. As we know, Kalian is a mage crow, and throughout this, there are dwarven and elven wardens. And there's even a dwarven Templar, which I think is significant because I think we've only ever seen humans as Templars, ever. So I feel like that's significant. I'm not really sure how that would work with the lyrium, but it's, it's fine, whatever.
I would wonder if perhaps maybe the dwarven Templar wouldn't need lyrium other than like the abilities of like counteracting magic, but they would already be resistant to magic.
I mean, right. I wonder if the way the Templars use lyrium isn't a little bit of like a anathema to the dwarves almost, because I feel like dwarves would see it more as like not holy necessarily, but like more of a sacred thing, and kind of feeling like, okay, we're basically injecting this drug feels a little sacrilegious. I don't know.
Right. Well, and like just a little like kind of cultural taboo almost in that of
that's
like
probably a better way.
You have to go through so much training and so much like process to become a lyrium minor in dwarven society. And so yeah, I do think that, but it was great to see a dwarven Templar and all of that, and the Antivan Crow mage, which was, it was so funny because we were talking with a friend and we were talking about, oh, I kind of want to be an Antivan Crow in Veilguard, but I also want to be a mage, and I don't think that really fits. And literally, I read in this book after that almost that exact conversation that she has with Kalian, and he's like, oh, I'm a mage, but you're a crow. I thought crows would be an assassin, and he's basically just like, it takes all kinds.
Yeah, true. Okay, so something I really want to talk about and really give props to the audiobook narrator, who is, let me look it up. Who is Gildart Jackson, I believe is his name. He did such a phenomenal job voicing Isaiah because, you know, the taint changes your voice and makes you sound more like a darkspawn over the years as you become a ghoul, essentially. And I didn't notice it for the longest time. And so I listened to this on audiobook, which I don't usually do, but it's just what I did this time. And I'm really glad I did, because at the beginning of the novel, you know, Isaiah is talking and he's voicing her like a normal person. And I probably got 2/3 of the way through it, paused, took lunch, whatever I was doing that day, and came back and I was like, oh my God, Isaiah sounds so different. Why does she sound like a darkspawn? Why is he voicing her with this robotic almost voice? And then I was like, oh, he's trying to make her sound more like a darkspawn. And throughout the end, to the end, it gets increasingly more and more darkspawn like. And I just really appreciated that detail. It's so small, but to me that was so impressive. So I really have to give props for that.
Yeah, that is really cool. I didn't listen to audiobooks, so I can't comment on that, but I obviously like trust your judgment on there, and that is really cool.
I would hope. But anyway, another thing that I want to discuss is the lore inconsistency. There are remarkably few for a non-BioWare writer, which tells me she really did her research. So again, I have to give props for that. But there is one lore inconsistency, and that is that Garahel talks about seducing a Qunari. However, they will not come to Thetis, the mainland, for another 100 years, over 100 years, in 630 Steel, which I just find funny because he actually, yeah, it's just funny to me.
Right. It's almost like, you know, sometimes when you play D&D and you accidentally like let slip like a modern reference or whatever, and then sometimes a party member will be like, what's that? Or something like that. Like, I feel like that should have been the moment of him saying like, oh, I slept with a Qunari or something like that, and then being like, what's a Qunari?
Yeah, for sure.
And I did comment that Garahel is just that sexy that he was able to seduce a Qunari before they arrived on the mainland.
Yeah, I just feel like there's a lot of logistics there that don't make sense.
But you're okay with Bull romancing a dwarf?
I mean, again, I feel the same way. Logistically, it seems complicated is all. But the last thing that I really want to mention about this book is that the Dragon Age section with Volya, when she's like doing research and talking to the Chamberlain of the Grey, I think, she's asking him questions about like, why are we having to do this research? And he like blows her off, and then she has like some of his correspondence, and he's like, is there anything from Warden Commander Clarel of Orlais? And she's like, no, why? And the Chamberlain is basically like, I haven't heard from her in a long time. I wonder how she's doing. And I'm just like, not well. That's how she's doing.
Right. It's so interesting to me because, like, I want to know what is happening how this story lines up with what we're told at the end of Dragon Age Inquisition, that like all communication out of Weissop
is ending.
I
am very curious about the Grey Warden storyline in Veilguard. I've seen some things. I don't want to talk about them, but it sounds very much like there's two sides, basically, two Grey Warden factions that are opposing each other. And I wonder, honestly, if it has anything to do with griffons. It's possible.
It is possible. Maybe this journal gets out, and there are people who want to be like, oh, we need to put these griffins through the joining. Or maybe they're like, oh, these griffins are property of the Grey Wardens, and Valya is like, no, you're not touching them. We're protecting them.
Right.
It's just interesting, but I did like the reference to the Warden Commander, who is basically leading the Orlesian Wardens to their doom.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also nice, like, it puts into perspective that like your decision regarding the Orlesian Wardens and Inquisition is really not like
that relevant
to the Grey Wardens at all. Which, you know, given what we talked about in the mid-break, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Like, expelling the Orlesian Grey Wardens, they would just go back to Weissop and station there. I mean, you know, the Grey Wardens were expelled from Ferelden and they didn't disappear.
Right, exactly. And I mean, I think the only way that's going to be super detrimental is if another blight breaks out over Orlais. And even then, Orlais specifically is so close to so many other nations, I don't think they're going to have to worry about it. Ferelden is different because the only nation that's really close to Ferelden is the Free Marches, and they have to cross a body of water. With Orlais, they've got a whole mountain range in between. So Ferelden is hard to get to. Orlais is not. And that's a big difference.
Yes, very much so.
But let's wrap this up a little bit. I really enjoyed this book a lot. It is probably my favorite of the novels. I exclude To Winter Nights just because it's a collection of short stories. But of the true novels, I think this is my favorite one. But I wouldn't necessarily give it a 5 because I do feel like while the Exalted Age timeline is super solid, I think the Dragon Age timeline could have been a little bit stronger. I wanted more of what Weishaupt, the Grey Wardens, are like in the Dragon Age, and we really didn't get much of a taste of that at all, just because the person that we follow isn't a Warden. Mm-hmm. So that would be my main criticism with the book, and really honestly my only criticism of the book.
Well, and I wonder, because other authors have talked about this, like sometimes when you write for like a universe or franchise like Dragon Age or even Star Wars, there are restrictions about what you are allowed to talk about because of projects that they have lined up down the road. And so I wonder if this author maybe wasn't allowed to explore Weishaupt as much because of
the Veilguard
and things going on.
Absolutely.
In there.
I think that's a very possible explanation for sure. Mm-hmm. What about you? What did you think?
I think I would give it like, I only docked it points for a little bit of the lore inconsistency of the Qunari and things like that, which isn't really that big of a deal, but I really liked the plot. I really liked the characters. I really liked the Mage Templar kind of like callbacks to the things going out in the world. And I think the author did a really good job of showing how a Orlais Ferelden Mage Templar war, where it's central there, and how it would affect somewhere so far away from them. Because in this world, like, geography really matters. Like, the Enderfells is in the northwest corner of Thedas. And so it's really hard for them to, like, get over there. And I'm sure that they don't know things that are going on. And I'm sure, like, they were probably marshaling, ready to go fight the Blight in Ferelden. And then they get, like, word of, oh, it's over. You can stay here.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point too. So my final answer is I give this a 4.25.
I think I gave 5s in all the categories except for lore, and I gave a 4.5, so 4.75 is what I gave this book.
Yeah, I feel like if you're going to be that generous with your ratings, you cannot take off for such a minor thing. I'm so sorry to tell you.
Okay, I guess I'll give a 5.
There you go. Much better. All right, well, I think we are good to wrap it up for the day.
All right, well, thanks again. We will continue with more books, but we only have 2 novels left of the novels for Dragon Age, and that's Asunder and Last Fight. And then we have, Asunder and Masked Empire. Sorry, misspoke.
This is the Last Fight episode.
This is the Last Fight. And then just a couple of the Blue Wraith comics and one more, I believe.
Yeah, we really only have like 3 more book episodes with Asunder, Masked Empire, and then the comics. And then we'll have a couple other character deep dives as well.
Right. So this has been a fun journey. Thank you all for listening to the Dragon Age Lorecast. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Dragon Age Lorecast. You can find us on Twitter at DA Lorecast.
If you have any lore questions, topics to unpack, or side character suggestions, join our Cups Podcasting and More Discord server. It's easily the best place on the internet. You can also support us financially through our Patreon. You can find us there on patreon.com/DragonAgeLorecast.
The Dragon Age Lorecast is part of the Robots Radio Network. For more information about the Robots Radio Network, join the Discord server via the link in our episode description.
If you enjoyed the show or learned something new today, please subscribe, leave us a review, and join the Patreon. And if you enjoyed our intro and outro music, give a big thank you to Pipeman Studios. Thank you, Pipeman. Thanks again for listening to the Dragon Age Lorecast. We'll see you next time.
Hi, welcome to 3 Count Thoughts. Let me introduce the crew real quick.
Hi, I'm Maverick Stone.
I'm Romer.
And I am Jaxus. Join us as we talk all things wrestling. Each week, we'll take a topic from the wrestling world, knock it around a bit, and then go over the week in wrestling from a strictly fan perspective. We can be found on all major podcast catchers. We can also be found at 3 Count Thoughts on both YouTube and Twitter. Or you can send us an email using 3countthoughts@gmail.com. Okay, are you ready? Ring the bell.